The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus said to his disciples, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. In those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day that Noah entered the ark. They did not know until the flood came and carried them all away. So will it be also at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be out in the field. One will be taken, and one will be left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken, and one will be left. Therefore, stay awake, for you do not know on which day your Lord will come. Be sure of this. If the master of the house had known the hour of night when the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and not let his house be broken into. So too, you also must be prepared, for at an hour you do not expect, the Son of Man will come." The Gospel of the Lord.
As many of you know, my first job directly out of college was a kindergarten teacher at a public school back in Pennsylvania. I was 22 years old at the time. I was given the job about a week and a half before the school year started. And best of all, when I saw my class roster, which of course was 24 or so little 5 and 6 year olds, I recognized a familiar name there, the principal's son. So all things considered, I suppose it would be hard to imagine a more intimidating environment to take your first teaching job. As if I were not already going to be under the principal's microscope as the new guy in the building, I was certainly going to be under some additional scrutiny, considering I was literally going to be the first teacher his son would ever have, teaching him to read and to write and to count, and of course a whole host of other things that certainly wouldn't impact him for the rest of his life or anything like that. Nevertheless, I have to say I was flattered that this man would trust the care of his son as well as 20-something other children to someone who practically could have been one of his own children at just 22 years old. Now, having grown up around a lot of teachers, and of course went to school with a lot of prospective teachers, and I've heard a lot of stories of new teachers, I've realized that it's not particularly common for a first-year teacher to have a glowing experience, okay? I've heard a lot of horror stories about unsupportive administrators, terrible parents, and the like. So I feel almost guilty in saying this. My experience teaching kindergarten was nothing but wonderful. It was nothing but wonderful. And I think that the biggest reason for that was how great of a relationship that I had with the principal, with my boss. You know, every single time he saw me, he would ask how I was doing. He would ask me what support I needed, if there was anything at all he could do to help me. Even when we met to discuss difficult things like disciplinary incidents in the classroom, and there were certainly plenty of those, he always seemed to value my input in a way that almost made me forget that I was just kind of a 22-year-old newbie, right out of college, never done this before. We just had a great working relationship. I knew, of course, he was my boss, but I never really felt afraid of him in any way. And that's why it always caught me off guard to hear the way some of the other teachers would speak. Of course, for any of you who are teachers, or maybe you taught at a time in the past, you know that one of the things that gets every teacher riled up is principal observations, right? Principal observations. In our school, once every quarter, once every semester or so, I guess depending on the length of each teacher's particular tenure, the principal would kind of come to your classroom completely unannounced, right, and catch you off guard. He would sit quietly in the back of the room for, about a half an hour or so. He'd sit there with his notepad, clipboard, he'd make notes, and then he would silently get up and leave. Wouldn't say a word to you, he'd just watch, and then out he would go. I would sit in the faculty lounge, have lunch with the other teachers, and I would hear them speak about this as if it were the end of the world, the scariest thing that could ever happen. They would try to predict it. They would try to warn each other. If they saw the principal walking around with his clipboard in the hallway, they'd start to guess what classrooms he might be going to. I even knew some teachers who would plan special lessons in advance that they could switch to if the principal came to visit. These occasional observations just created such an atmosphere of anxiety within the school building. It was really unbelievable. And I suppose that, just personally, I never felt that way at all. Maybe I was just naive. Maybe I was just in the honeymoon phase of being a new teacher and these things. Maybe I was too dumb to realize that I should have been afraid. I don't know. But my thought process, I think, was kind of straightforward. I'm thinking, I talk to this guy every day, right? I talk to the principal every day. I have a great relationship with him. I know that he values me a lot. Otherwise, he would never have hired me and invited me to work here in his building. Why would I fear him coming for an observation? As a matter of fact, if anything, I almost kind of looked forward to it. I liked teaching. I worked hard at it. I thought I had a lot of neat lesson plans to do with the kids. Was everything that I did a total winner? Obviously not, right? I was just a beginner. I was making mistakes left and right. A lot of my lesson plans were complete and utter disasters. In retrospect, sometimes I even think about some of them today and I think, man, what on earth was I thinking? But ultimately, I suppose that part of me felt a little bit just kind of like a child, right? Just excited that Dad might stop by for a moment and see what I'm up to, right? And so I never dreaded it, dreaded the principal coming. And it's not because I was just like militantly prepared or anything like that. It's just because him coming to visit just felt to me kind of natural. Like it was just an extension of the relationship that we had already built in the few short months that I had been working there. Anyway, I share all of this with you, and I hope you kind of get where I'm going with this. I share this because it was one of the first things that came to mind when I was going through the readings that we encounter for today. These readings that we encounter on this first Sunday of Advent. The theme for this first week, if you haven't picked up on this, it's always the same. It's the same theme, first week of Advent every time. Be prepared. Be prepared. Stay awake. Be ready. You don't know the day or the hour. It will come like a thief in the night. You'll be completely caught off guard. I think that what bothers me is that we tend, I think, as a church, to approach this first Sunday of Advent through this lens of fear and anxiety. We tend to speak about the coming of the Lord Jesus, whether it's at the moment of our own death or at the moment of our final judgment, as something that's very scary and it's something that's very intimidating. It's kind of like how so many of the teachers that I worked with spoke about their observation by the principal as this horrible thing. We need to predict it. We need to know when it's going to happen. We need to warn everyone. But why do we do that? Our God is not a tyrant. Our God is not unfair or vindictive. He's not looking to trick us or catch us or manipulate us. The way I see it, the day that we see the Lord face to face, whenever that might be, should simply be an extension of what we experience every single day. If we have a true relationship with the Lord, why would we be afraid to meet him? If we're genuinely trying to live righteously, to live as saints, knowing that God's grace and God's mercy will make up for whatever's lacking in our efforts, why would we be afraid for him to pay us a visit and see what we're up to? I've always said that the reason that the idea of death and judgment and eternity feels so jarring to our culture is because, unfortunately, it so often stands in very stark contrast to the way that we live pretty much every other day. If I have no relationship with Jesus, sure, I'd be afraid to meet him. If my thoughts and my deeds are defined each day by my sinfulness and my pride and my selfishness and my arrogance, then sure, I'm not going to be terribly excited to show Jesus what I'm up to these days. I have no doubt that some of the teachers who were most vocally afraid of the principal's observation were the ones who rebelled against him. They talked behind his back. They criticized the job that he was doing. And then in their own classrooms, they might not have been putting forward their best effort each day. Maybe they're just going through the motions, right? Complaining, collecting a paycheck, living from weekend to weekend. Yeah, I'd be pretty intimidated too if the principal came to see me, if that's how I was operating each and every day. I think we just need to remember that the Lord does not want us to encounter any of these readings that we encounter today in a spirit of fear or anxiety. Rather, he desires that we hear these readings, we absorb these readings, and understand this message of preparedness and say to ourselves, how can I make it so that when my time comes for the Lord to see me face to face, when I look on the Lord face to face, it's just a natural extension of the way that I'm already trying to live. And of course, he gives us that opportunity, does he not? Just as my principal would invite me into his office day after day, does not the Lord too invite us to encounter him in the pages of Scripture, to converse with him, be consoled by him in the silence of prayer, to experience his closeness in the sacrament of the Eucharist, to encounter his mercy in the confessional, his healing presence in each of the sacraments, his hiddenness in our brothers and sisters who are, of course, made in his image and likeness. Just as my principal would stop by, my classroom every few weeks to see the work that I was doing with the kids, does not God invite us to practice our work every day? He loves us, and he trusts each of us enough to bring us into his vineyard and give us care over his creation. Can we strive every day to respond to this love and respond to this trust by shooting to be the saints that we were created to be, by striving to live out this call of our baptism, even if we're not always perfect, even if we rely on the Lord's mercy and grace to keep going day after day, which of course we do and we should. So yeah, that's what I want to stress today, this first Sunday of Advent. We don't know the day or the hour. I talk to a lot of families after the death of a loved one, sometimes right there in the hospital, immediately after it happens. And I would say it tends to be the same story time and time again. We didn't expect it. We didn't expect it. The day that he or she went home to meet the Lord face to face was a day much like any other day. We had breakfast, we went to Mass, we watched the Cowboys, and then boom, an accident, a fall, a stroke, a heart attack. But unpredictability should not necessitate fear or anxiety. Like I said, I never knew when my principal was going to come visit my classroom, but there was part of me that actually looked forward to it. Fear goes away when we're ready, or even when we're excited. Anxiety disappears when we know and love the one who will judge us justly. So let your life, your everyday life, flow seamlessly into the day when you will meet the Lord face to face. The God we strive to know now will be the same God that we know for all eternity. The God in whose vineyard we joyfully labor now will be the same God who in his mercy will give us reward.